straight, white Christian.
No, Jesse, this is the subscribe thing.
Oh, yeah. I need you all to subscribe, support us on Patreon, like us on Facebook, and follow me on Twitter.
Got it.
I have with me Dale Hansen. Dale Hansen is an award-winning sportscaster, reporter, and host at ABC affiliate WFAA TV in Dallas, Texas. And I want to talk to Dale about men, families, guns, racism, the whole thing that's happening in the country today. Dale, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
So, Dale, you are you married family man, right?
Yes.
And how many children do you have?
I have 2 children.
All grown.
My first marriage, by the way, just so everything's clear on the record here. I was married at 19 years of age and had 2 children by the time I was 21. And I've been married to the lovely Mrs. Hansen now 36 years here in just a couple of months.
Amazing. Congratulations. Are you the head of your wife?
I don't think she would think so. I was listening to when you were talking to Rose a moment ago. I don't look at it that way. I'm pretty sure she doesn't look at it that way. I think it's more of a partnership, quite honestly. When you mentioned Rose about being president and vice president, I looked at her and I said, do you agree with that? And she said, well, we are, but I don't think it's by any design. I think it's just the way it is in our particular family. But I would argue she has a little more control and a little more input than a so-called vice president.
Amazing. So were you surprised your wife agreed to the order more so than you?
Probably. She's. I'm not exactly sure how to say that, but I mean, I make a lot of the financial decisions. I am the one who works because I didn't want her to work years ago, just for the convenience of being able to help me. But I don't think it's that simple. I don't think it's that easy. It depends on the situation, whether it's money or whether it's where we live or the house that we buy. I think we're a joint partnership.
Are you a Christian?
No, I'm not.
You believe in God?
No.
Are you an atheist?
I prefer the term agnostic.
And what does that mean to you?
That means that I'm willing to be convinced, but I'm not. I don't. I lost my faith a long time ago. A friend of mine was killed in Vietnam, and I haven't been inside a church since. I was raised a Christian. I have my 5-year pin for never missing Sunday school when I was young. But I don't believe anymore. And when I say agnostic, I guess to me it simply means that I don't believe, but I would certainly be willing to if I could see the evidence of that. And quite frankly, I don't see the evidence that you and so many others luckily have in your life.
And so you do believe there is a God, but you just don't believe in a God. Am I right about?
No, I don't. No, I don't believe there is.
You don't believe there is a God?
I'm sorry?
You say you don't believe there is a God?
No.
Really? And so at one time you did believe, but when your friend was killed, that caused you to doubt that there is a God?
Yes, I mean, as trite as that might sound to a lot of people, I just came to that and other things in my life, but I basically came to the conclusion that anyone who could inflict such pain on a community, on a family, on an individual, was not someone that I cared to believe in anymore. And I guess it obviously it doesn't make sense to you. Quite frankly, it doesn't make sense to my wife. I was somewhat chuckling when you said, asking me if I was atheist or agnostic. She believes in God, and she hates it when I refer to myself as an atheist. So for her benefit, I refer to myself as agnostic.
Amazing. And so, did you blame God for your friend being killed or getting killed?
I guess to some degree I did. But I looked at it more as I evolved. I was only 21 at the time, or actually I was like 19 at the time. It's a bit of a contradiction if I say that I blame God, that I must believe that there was a God, and yet I did believe. But again, as clear as I could possibly make it, I felt that the world that I was living in did not strike me as a world that a benevolent ruler, a benevolent power could stand idly by and watch it happen. It didn't make sense to me, so I chose to follow another path.
So it is correct then to say that at the time you did blame God for that happening to your friend, right?
I would say on that particular day, yes. Yeah.
And then as a result of blaming him, you turned away from him.
That's basically right, yeah.
Amazing. That is so amazing to me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's amazing to a lot of people. I know it was amazing to my mom. My mom was a very, very devout Christian. And basically the day before she died, she was laughing and grinning with the nurses and the family about how excited she was to be reunited with her family in heaven. And my dad never set foot in a church. I don't think he believed in God. It was never talked about with him. But I know he never went to church. But he insisted that we, as the kids in the family, went with my mom every day, or every Sunday rather. My mom went to church about 2 to 3 times a week.
Yeah. Were you close?
But when I was a boy, we had our little fellowship group on a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Which was more just kind of a gathering than any hard religious teachings. And then, of course, every Sunday morning we were in church and we had a Bible class. And I just think it was never really that important in my life. As I've tried to explain to people, I believe a great deal in the teachings. My children were raised in the Catholic Church. My first wife, when I was married as a teenager, was a Catholic. I guess I put it this way, I believe a great deal in the teachings of the church and religion, but I believe it's simply a crutch.
So let me ask, were you close to your father?
Pretty much so, yeah. We fell apart my senior year in high school, and we were at odds for a few years, but we patched it up. And he was not a very open, loving kind of a man. He was very hard. He was very tough.
Did you forgive him?
Oh, absolutely.
You told him that? Did you tell him that?
I did that as well.
Were you close?
Yeah, of course.
So you were closer to your mother than your father?
I would say so. It was your typical nuclear family growing up. The family was always together for dinner every night. But my dad was an incredibly strict father. But as I told him, I said, I am who I am today. I've managed to do what I have because of him. The lessons that he instilled in me. I didn't particularly like the way he went about it many times.
Right.
But I learned to appreciate the life he gave me.
How, you have brothers and sisters?
I have 2 younger sisters.
And were they close to their father?
I think so. I don't. My one sister is like 9 years younger than me. My other sister is only 2 years younger than me.
Right.
But I think they were probably closer to Dad than I was even. But I think all of all of us had a certain, almost a fear when we were kids, when he would come home, because we were concerned that there would be fights, there would be a price to pay if he was in a bad mood, that kind of a thing.
So, Dale, I want to quickly ask you one other question about the God thing. You don't believe there is a God. How did we as human beings get here if not created by God?
Science.
Science.
I mean, I think the bottom line to me, sir, is I'm not smart enough to give you an absolute explanation, but what I've always argued with my friends is that, because that's usually the fallback question that people say. Well, if there isn't a God, then how did we get here? I have no idea, but I do believe that it's as easy to believe that there was this big explosion, there was this big bang, there was this planet roaming around, as it is to believe in a superpower, and that's where I get basically hung up, is that yes, on the one hand, it makes perfect sense that it did require a powerful being to create the world. But then who created the powerful being? Who created the God? How did God get here? So as hard as it is for me to explain to you how two planets collided, and how did the planets get here, and how did the fish crawl out of the ocean, and how did the fish become a monkey and a monkey become a man, or whatever this argument is, I simply find it easier to believe in science than to believe in the supernatural.
So you believe the two children that you and your wife have came about as a result of a Big Bang?
Well, I like to think of it as a Big Bang. I'm not sure he did. But I think there are scientific explanations as to how a sexual act leads to the eggs mixing with the sperm, which leads to the embryo, which leads to the fetus, which leads to the birth. There's a scientific explanation as to how that happened. And while I certainly don't understand it, and I certainly find it incredibly hard to believe that this is somehow possible, I do find it as easy to believe as I would in, oh no, there is this superpower who is all-knowing, sees everything, knows everything, controls everything.
But science itself doesn't explain the mysteries of life. It doesn't explain that, and particularly, it could tell you how some things happen, how the sperm connected with the egg and all that, but it cannot explain the mysteries of life. Let me ask, Dale, what is a man?
I mean, that's probably a little bit above my pay grade. I simply think it's the human matter that is a life. I don't look at a man as I think, from what I heard in your brief conversation with Rose, I don't look at a man as different than a woman. I don't look at. I happen to be a great animal lover, but I do think man has a place on this earth above animals, for example. But I think we're just part of the makeup of this great universe that we're somehow blessed to live in. I don't know what other description I could say to a man other than a person who has an obligation and an opportunity to provide for his family as best he can, to give his children an opportunity to compete in life, to try to set an example for others. It's like when I talk about role models, quite honestly, in professional sports. People whine and complain about an athlete being expected or required even to be a role model. And my position is we're all role models. Most of us fail. Most of us come up short of that standard.
Are you a man? Are you a man?
Everyone model.
Are you a man?
I'm a man.
You're a man. Where do you get your values from, if not from God?
From my serious, simply from my upbringing, from the people who have an influence on my life. I get some of my values from my mom. I get some of my values from my dad. I get most of my values, in all seriousness, from my coaches and teachers that I had along the way. What I consider my values are almost self-taught. My dad was a very racist person. As I said one time in a commentary, my dad used the N-word like it was a proper noun. My mom despite being this incredible Christian, was a very racist person.
And what made her racist?
Who told my daughter, don't bring this black baby to Iowa. I would feel very uncomfortable walking around town with my black great granddaughter, and that's part of another small part of why I turned away from religion years ago is what I perceive as the hypocrisy of that. I don't see a lot of Christian leaders following what I believe to be the Word of God, and so I'm basically this self-taught man. I saw how people were being treated. I saw why wars were being fought. I saw how young people were being killed. My coaches and my teachers who instilled in me a work ethic, a team.
So it sounds like
it's all self-taught.
It sounds like your mother was a Christian, but not a good example of being a Christian, and maybe that had an impact on turning you away as well.
Oh, I think it had a great impact. I think it had a great impact.
What made you think that it's racist to use the N-word and not want your daughter to bring her black baby around? Why is that racist?
Because again, I think you're simply, when you're making a decision about a person simply based on the pigmentation of their skin, I think racist is as good a word as any to apply.
Why can't it just be a hatred for, or an angry toward, or just not liking that? It doesn't have to be racist, because angry people tend to make bad decisions. They tend to judge.
True.
And
but
so why can't it just be an evil person disliking another person rather than
because they don't know that person? I think if a white person says, I don't like that person, and there was a great line in the Kevin Costner movie when he was trying to adopt his black granddaughter, and the attorney says, so you like all black people? And Kevin Costner's response was, not all of them. And if my mother had said, I don't want to meet Mackenzie, and I don't want to take Mackenzie around town because I don't like Mackenzie, then I would have been somewhat okay with that. But she said that before she knew her. So when you make a decision about someone you don't know, that goes well beyond just a person who doesn't like another person.
But that's not
when
racist.
You choose not to like a group of people, now you're racist.
But that's not racism, though. I say that racism does not exist. It has never existed. And I was born in Alabama on a plantation under the Jim Crow laws. And at one time, I thought that racism existed. Once I moved to LA and I started to listen to the lie from the race hustlers, like the so-called civil rights leaders and others. And I fell into that lie and believed it. But I realized our battle is a spiritual battle. It's a warfare between good and evil. So it's either wrong or right. Those who have anger, they have that hatred. Those who do not have it, they have love. And so they don't feel that way about human beings. They see what's going on. What do you say to that?
Well, I disagree, obviously. I see racism every day. I've seen racism every day of my life as well, because as I mentioned a moment ago, my granddaughter is black. And I've seen it time and time again where she is subjected to different treatment until they find out who her grandfather is. I do understand, and I do somewhat even applaud you for trying to take more individual responsibility. And I get this argument about the civil rights hustlers and the like, and I do think there's an element to that. I really do. That some people try to take that advantage to the other side. But I think without question that it's rather naive and rather simplistic to argue that the mistreatment and the discrimination against people of color is simply evil and good. Yes, I think it's evil. I agree that it's evil.
So
it's based on racism because they base their decisions upon the color of a person's skin or the religion that they choose. That's racism.
Well, that's not true. In that I grew up under the Jim Crow laws, and black people at that time, for the most part, was a decent people. They got married for the most part. They had their children under the umbrella of marriage. They did not hate their fellow man. They worked hard and took care of themselves. They bought land. They were educated. And so it was the government. It was the government that was doing that to the blacks, and not all white people. Most white people were not for that. And it wasn't until the civil rights leaders came along and they told black people that this is racism, and they gave black people the government. The government became the daddy. They took the men out of the home. The government became the daddy, and the race hustle like Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, the Congressional Black Caucus, NAACP, and others, and most black preachers who are not called by God but by their mama, they caused black people to fall into a state of anger by breaking up the family and becoming their leaders. And they did that in order to manipulate and control, because you cannot control a moral people. You have to demoralize them. And so for the last 60 years or so, they have kept blacks in a demoralization state of mind and being in order to use them. That word was made up to keep blacks from looking at themselves and blame others so that they can control blacks and put fear in white people for personal gain.
Who put the government in power to have that power? It was the white voters of Alabama that elected George Wallace.
Right.
It wasn't George Wallace sitting in his office in Alabama going, I think I'm going to break down the black family.
But that still doesn't
mean... It was the voters of Alabama who put George Wallace in that office. And in many cases, the family members that you're talking about weren't allowed to vote in Alabama.
But George Wallace didn't break up the family. It was encouraged by Lyndon B. Johnson, supported by the so-called civil rights leaders. There's so much I want to get to with you, and I want to take some calls. You suggested, let me ask, are black people racist toward white people?
No, I don't. And again, we can argue the semantics of the term, but I don't think you can be racist when you don't have the power to back it up.
But they had the power under Barack Obama, who hated white people, and blacks are more hatred toward...
Obama didn't hate white people.
Yes, he did.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, he did. He really did. And blacks...
You don't think trying to provide insurance for people like my sister, for example, trying to provide insurance for all people in America, that is somehow translates to hating white people?
Yes, that is a sign of hatred, because Obama, like most children of the lie, don't believe that blacks are capable of taking care of themselves, so the government needs to provide. And to look down on anyone in that manner simply means that you hate them. You have no respect for them at all. He believed that he can do it and that others can do it, but the blacks can't. Just how the Democrats have been treated blacks for the last 60 years, they see blacks as dumb, incapable. That's why they offer them affirmative action, free programs, government program, and that's hatred of a fellow man.
No, I think the affirmative action that you mentioned a moment ago, a friend of mine who's a Harvard-educated judge here in Dallas and a person of color, I think says it great. This very white conservative friend of mine said to him one time, how long do we have to continue this argument of affirmative action? And my friend, the judge, said, well, you had it your way for about 200 years. So I would say that we've got about 45 to go.
That's amazing. That judge should be fired. Dale, I need 3 short answers because time is running out, and I want to squeeze in a few calls for you. Number 1, do you agree with me that most, not all, but most black people are suffering not due to this phony idea of racism, but the destruction of the family and the lack of moral character?
I don't know if I would say all, but I think without question that's a huge part of it. I mean, again, the family structure, especially in the black community, I think is at a crisis point, without question. And
number 2, do you believe in such thing as white privilege?
Oh, without question, absolutely. I've seen it every day of my life.
And give me one quick example of white privilege.
A man like me who's been fired from 8 of the 11 jobs that he's had in his life, never went to college, and gets fired in Dallas, Texas, and gets hired across the street a week later. If I was a person of color, I would have never made it past my 3rd job.
How do you know
when
that?
I was young, I was a bad guy to work with.
How do you know, had you been a black person, that you would not have gotten another job like that?
Because we didn't have a person of color working on Dallas television until 1978.
So you're talking about way back then? Well,
way back then is not that far back to some of us. I don't think all those ills have been fixed. But you see it in every day. I mean, whether it's driving while black, while it's going into a department store, or the employment service.
May I say you're wrong about that? There's no such thing as driving white while black. What it is, black people have turned away from God. They are immoral people, so they don't train their children in the right way to go. And the kids are growing up in single parents' home, and most black men and women, they grew up hating their mothers and grandmothers. And instead of showing them how to forgive their mothers and grandmothers, they're being told by the race hustlers and others that cops are racist. And so these kids have this anger that starts in the home, and then they go out and they believe the lie that the cops are racist. So when they are stopped by cops, they don't follow the orders of the cop because they believe it's racist. So they overreact, and then trouble comes.
Well, again, in a very, very small part of that, there is an element of truth. But this friend that I mentioned a moment ago is a judge who drives a Mercedes. He wears beautiful suits. He lives in an affluent part of the Dallas community and was stopped about once a week driving home late at night.
And the reason for that.
What would be the reason for that?
Because black men and women, but especially men, have not been responsible in raising their children in the right way, and most of the black children are out of control. And so when you're a cop, you don't know who the bad guy is or the good guy, and sometimes the good have to suffer with the bad if you don't do the right thing in the beginning. And so,
but they don't stop me.
Because it's not violence, and the lack of respect for authority is not out of control in the white community as it is for the black. And you have not been told that the cops are stopping you simply because of your color. Blacks have been lied to in that manner because the hustlers want them out of control. It brings in a lot of power and wealth for them. And so these kids are being lied to. That's why they're overreacting.
Well, obviously, I don't agree, and nor do my black friends agree.
Because they're liars.
I don't think my judge friend is a victim of a race hustler. Yes. He grew up in a beautiful family in New York. I knew his mother. His brother is a surgeon. I know,
but if your judge friend is saying that, then he is a liar. He may be having a good job and living in a good community, but I wouldn't trust him if I were you. One last thing. Are you really loving and enjoying the Great White Hope as I am?
Who's the Great White Hope?
President Trump.
No, I think he's awful for America.
Really? Even though
I think he's horrible for America.
Even though he's making America great again?
How? I think America has
cut back on taxes, restriction regulation. we're safer, and all the good things that are happening?
No, goodness, no. I think, number one, that who's going to pay the debt? All the Republicans have told me for about the last 30 years is that we have to get spending under control and we have to get the debt under control. His recent tax bill, which helped me personally, not enough to change my life.
It helped me too.
But who's going to pay this debt that Bob Corker and all the Republicans have convinced me is such a major problem for my children?
But you were not complaining when the Democrats were raising the debt. Well, Obama raised the debt through the roof. I didn't hear you complaining about Obama doing it. Why are you not happy with Trump doing it?
I'm talking about the Republicans. The Republicans said the debt was an issue. Now all of a sudden they're saying the debt is not an issue. Which is it? Which is it? And do you really want a wall? Do you really want to spend $25 to $30 billion for a wall?
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's squeeze some calls in. Marie from South Carolina, been waiting a long time. Marie, thank you for calling. You're on with Dale.
Hey, praise the Lord, Jesse. I've been listening to this gobbledygook. This man is so deceived. He is blind as a bat.
And give me one example real fast of him being blind. His blindness.
Number one, he doesn't want to believe there's a God. And he wants to believe in that scientific garbage. We didn't get here by any Big Bang theory. And also, he has the question, well, if God is supreme power, then how was he created? He is the creator. There is no other.
How do you respond, Dale?
The Lord created everything.
How do you respond, Dale?
Well, I respond like I did some 40 minutes ago. So God was just there? God is just the super being? And yet my so-called gobbledygook science makes no sense to this person, but the fact that there is a creator of incredible powers, and that makes perfect sense. I've never been able to justify those two arguments.
Who gave the authors of science the ability to understand science?
The scientists, through their studies.
Dale, give me a yes or no. Do you think we need to get rid of the Second Amendment?
No.
Do you agree with me that this phony rally that they had this past weekend, that it was sad to see adults brainwash and dumb down and use children, and that these children are dumb and stupid and have no idea what they are doing?
Absolutely no.
Absolutely no. Let me go to Tim out of Louisiana. Tim, thank you for calling. You're on with Dale.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Manhood Hour. My question is, for you, Jesse, what is the best way to prove an atheist wrong? And for your guest, what is the best way to prove a religious person wrong?
You want to go for that first, Dale?
Well, no, again, that's what I was just saying to my wife here a moment ago. I think this is the argument of infinity. I mean, we will always go around in a circle. If you want to prove that me and I'll accept the term atheist, if you want to prove me wrong, I simply will return the question and say, show me. You prove it to me. I can't prove to you, and this is what I've always said, sir. I've always said this. I respect your right to religion because I know it's necessary in many, many ways. But you can no more prove to me that there is a God than I can possibly prove to you that there's not. It's an argument. It's an argument that has no answer. It has no end. As my high school preacher used to tell me, when I started to remotely question the argument, he said, you have to have faith. That's all I've ever heard. Now, you can say, well, we have life on this planet. Well, no, that's not the explanation, because I keep coming back to you.
I think
who created the creator?
The best way to show an atheist that there is a God is you have to be that example. You have to show the atheist and all people love and be a living example who God is, and they would see it for themselves. They would see God operating through you, and never try to prove to them there is a God, because you cannot prove there is a God. You have to become a living example.